The private wing of St. Bartholomew's Rehabilitation Center in Boston remained eerily quiet, disturbed only by the soft hum of medical equipment. Sophia Blackwood, 38, heiress to the Blackwood Pharmaceuticals fortune and one of the few white CEOs who had built her own empire separate from her family's legacy, had been lying motionless for 21 days. A mysterious fall from her penthouse balcony had left her with a jagged scar across her right cheekbone, the only visible reminder of the tragedy that had nearly claimed her life. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. What no one knew, not even her private medical team, was that Sophia had regained consciousness on the 4th day after the accident. She had made the calculated decision to remain silent, keeping her eyes unfocused and her breathing measured for a very specific reason. She needed to discover who had pushed her from that balcony. "We need to accelerate our timeline, Elijah," said Thomas Blackwood, her husband of 5 years, from the corridor outside her room. His voice was muffled but perfectly audible in the room's stillness. "The board is getting restless. Investors are asking questions. We can't maintain this charade indefinitely." "Patience, dear cousin," replied Elijah, Sophia's cousin and chief operating officer at Blackwood Innovations, her tech company that had outgrown the family pharmaceutical business. "Another week, and the board will have no choice but to invoke the incapacitation clause. Dr. Winters has already prepared the necessary documentation." Beneath her mask of stillness, Sophia's mind raced. Her suspicions had been correct. The accident had been merely the opening move. Her fall from the balcony hadn't been a simple murder attempt, but part of an elaborate scheme to seize control of her company. "What about her attorney, Jackson Pierce?" Thomas asked. "He continues to demand access to the original medical assessments. Jackson won't remain an obstacle much longer." Elijah replied with chilling confidence. "I've arranged for certain financial irregularities to be discovered in his firm's accounts. It seems some client funds have been misappropriated." Sophia felt rage building as she listened to the conspiracy against her most trusted advisor. Jackson Pierce, one of the most respected black attorneys in corporate law, had been her mentor since law school and later her right hand in building Blackwood Innovations. The door opened with a soft click. The footsteps that entered were different, deliberate, measured, confident. "Good evening, Miss Blackwood." The voice was deep, professional, without the artificial sympathy many used when addressing unresponsive patients. "I'm Darius, your new night caretaker." Sophia detected a faint scent of sandalwood as he moved around the room, checking her vitals and adjusting something on her monitor. "Your readings are stable," he said, making notes. "That's encouraging." There was a moment of silence, then she felt the slight depression of someone sitting in the chair beside her bed. "I don't know if you can hear me," Darius continued, his voice now lower, almost confessional. "But there's something you should know. I shouldn't be here." Sophia maintained her perfectly controlled breathing, though her curiosity was immediately heightened. "I was brought in 3 days ago to replace your previous caretaker. She resigned unexpectedly, or that's what I was told." Darius paused. "But last night, while reviewing your medical charts, I noticed something disturbing. Your medication levels are significantly higher than protocol recommends for your condition, and there are inconsistencies in the neurological assessment reports." He leaned closer, his voice now barely above a whisper. "I'm not just a caretaker, Miss Blackwood. I have specialized training in neurological rehabilitation, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that your treatment plan has been compromised. Someone is deliberately keeping you sedated, preventing your recovery." Sophia's heart quickened, a change too subtle for the monitors to register, but real nonetheless. "I don't know who would do this or why," Darius continued, "but I promise I'll uncover the truth, and I'll help you regain consciousness. Even if it means jeopardizing my position or worse." He stood and adjusted her IV drip. "I'm gradually reducing your sedation. No one will notice, but within a few days, you should begin showing signs of awareness. When that happens, we can." The door swung open. Darius stepped away from the bed with professional composure. "Just completing the hourly assessment as requested, Dr. Winters," he said, his tone completely transformed. "Thank you, Darius," a female voice replied. "I'll take over from here." When the door closed, Sophia felt simultaneously alarmed and hopeful. In a world where she believed herself completely isolated, she had discovered an unexpected ally. But what Darius couldn't know, what no one suspected, was that she was already conscious, and behind those vacant eyes, a strategy was forming that would transform this family betrayal into her most powerful weapon. What no one in that exclusive rehabilitation center could imagine was that this woman, whom everyone considered helpless, had built an empire precisely because she recognized opportunities where others saw only obstacles. And now, lying motionless while they plotted to steal everything she had created, Sophia was already beginning to devise not only her recovery, but the spectacular downfall of those who dared to underestimate her. Sophia's plan began to take shape on the fourth night after meeting Darius. As he adjusted her pillows, she risked an almost imperceptible movement, flexing her index finger twice. When he asked if she could hear him, Darius froze, his dark eyes widening. "You're conscious?" he whispered. "A slight movement, yes." His expression transformed from shock to determination. "We need to establish a communication system," he murmured, glancing at the door. "One movement for yes, two for no. Blink once if you understand." Night after night while the center slept, they developed a rudimentary method of communication. Darius brought cards with letters printed on them, and Sophia spelled out words letter by letter. It was painstaking and exhausting, but each completed word felt like a small victory against those who sought to silence her. "They pushed me from the balcony," she spelled out on the first night. "Who would do such a thing?" Darius asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "Thomas and Elijah, Project Lazarus." Project Lazarus, the revolutionary medical technology that Blackwood Innovations was secretly developing under Sophia's direct supervision, promised to make critical medications accessible to underserved communities at a fraction of the current cost. Sophia had kept the details closely guarded, sharing them only with her small team of trusted associates. During daylight hours, Darius observed Thomas, who visited frequently, always accompanied by Dr. Winters, reviewing medical charts and asking seemingly concerned but calculated questions. Elijah made occasional appearances, his eyes constantly scanning the room as if assessing its contents for future liquidation. "I have information about Jackson Pierce," Darius informed her one evening after ensuring they weren't being monitored. "I contacted a friend at his firm. The financial irregularities were fabricated, falsified transactions, and backdated documents. They're trying to discredit him before he can challenge the medical reports." Sophia's eyes flashed with anger, even in her state of enforced immobility. "Don't worry," Darius smiled confidently. "I've already sent him an anonymous message warning him about the setup. Jackson is brilliant. He'll recognize the deception." Meanwhile, Elijah was advancing his scheme. Darius managed to record a conversation between him and Dr. Winters in the hallway outside Sophia's room. "The board meets next Tuesday," Elijah said, checking his platinum watch. "We need the final neurological assessment confirming permanent cognitive impairment." "It's nearly complete," Dr. Winters replied, her voice hushed and anxious. "But the night caretaker has been asking questions about the previous reports and medication dosages." Elijah sighed impatiently. "He's just a caretaker. If he becomes problematic, terminate his contract." What neither of them realized was that Sophia wasn't merely listening, she was regaining her strength. Under Darius's careful guidance, she performed small exercises when no one was watching, flexing muscles, moving fingers, gradually rebuilding her strength for the moment she would need it most. On the seventh night, Darius brought an unexpected visitor. "There's someone here who needs to see you," he whispered, securing the door behind him. "I trust her completely." A stern-looking woman approached the bed, studying Sophia with clinical precision. "Ms. Blackwood, I'm Dr. Amina Osei, specialist in neurological trauma. Darius consulted me about irregularities in your case." She glanced at Darius, closed the blinds, and locked the door. For 40 minutes, Dr. Osei examined Sophia discreetly, without equipment that might alert the center's staff. "As we suspected," she concluded, "there is no permanent neurological damage. The extended sedation is criminal negligence at best, attempted murder at worst. She's being artificially maintained in this state." "We need conclusive evidence," Darius argued, "something that can't be disputed in court." "I have a proposition," Dr. Osei replied, opening her medical bag. "But it's risky and will require Ms. Blackwood's complete cooperation." The following morning, Elijah entered the Blackwood Innovations executive boardroom with a triumphant smile. The board was assembled, 14 men and women in impeccable business attire, prepared to vote on the temporary transfer of authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, distributing documents, "as you can see from the comprehensive medical assessment, my cousin has unfortunately suffered irreversible cognitive impairment. Dr. Winters recommends immediate action to stabilize the company's leadership." Zara Washington, the youngest board member and Sophia's protege, examined the documents with visible skepticism. "This seems remarkably convenient." "Elijah, Sophia was in perfect health before the incident." "Tragedies occur unexpectedly," Thomas interjected, his expression a masterpiece of practiced grief. Zara noticed that Thomas was already wearing a different wedding band, though his wife had been fighting for her life for barely 3 weeks. "We all deeply respect what Sophia created," Elijah continued, his honeyed voice concealing the ambition that pulsed beneath. "But we must be pragmatic. The stock has already declined 15% since the incident. Investors require stability." What Elijah failed to realize was that Zara was discreetly recording every word on her smartwatch. A counterplan was in motion, not his, but Sophia's. At that precise moment in St. Bartholomew's, Darius exchanged meaningful glances with Dr. Osei as they both reviewed the results of a confidential test they had just conducted. The monitor displayed something. No one anticipated something that would completely alter the balance of power. The woman everyone believed to be permanently incapacitated was not only fully conscious, but had regained significantly more control over her body than anyone could have imagined. "Ready for the next phase?" Darius asked as Dr. Osei concealed the portable equipment. Sophia's eyes opened fully for the first time in weeks, and a slow, determined smile formed on her lips. "More than ready," she replied, her voice raspy from disuse but charged with resolve. "They believe they're seizing my company, but they have no conception of what awaits them." The heiress, everyone presumed lost in the shadows of cognitive impairment, was, in fact, merely waiting for the perfect moment to emerge, not simply to reclaim what was rightfully hers, but to reveal a truth that would shake the very foundations of everything her family believed they had constructed. A secret that not even Darius, her most loyal ally, could have anticipated. The Blackwood Innovations boardroom was as silent as a mausoleum awaiting its next occupant. Elijah smiled discreetly as he distributed copies of the falsified medical assessment. Thomas, seated beside him, maintained an expression of practiced sorrow, occasionally dabbing at the corner of his eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, tears that never materialized. "If there are no further questions," Elijah announced, "we can proceed to vote on the temporary transfer of executive authority as recommended by Dr. Winters." Zara Washington raised her hand. I have one final question. Why isn't Dr. Winters present to explain her medical findings personally? Elijah exchanged a quick glance with Thomas. Unfortunately, the doctor has been called away on an urgent matter, but her assessment is unambiguous. As unambiguous as her ethics? The clear, commanding voice resonated through the conference room. All heads turned abruptly toward the entrance. Sophia Blackwood stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a crisp white suit, leaning slightly on a sleek carbon fiber cane. Beside her, Darius and Dr. Osei observed the shocked reactions of the board. Jackson Pierce, her attorney, followed closely behind with a leather portfolio in his hands. Thomas knocked over his water glass, spreading liquid across the polished table. Elijah remained frozen, his face ashen. That's impossible, he muttered, slowly rising to his feet. You're suffering from severe cognitive impairment, Dr. Winters confirmed. Dr. Winters, Sophia interrupted, stepping into the center of the room, is currently being interviewed by the Massachusetts Medical Board regarding charges of falsifying medical documents and attempted homicide through criminal medical negligence. Dr. Osei stepped forward, placing a set of neurological assessments on the table. As an independent neurological trauma specialist, I can verify that Ms. Blackwood was maintained in an artificially sedated state without medical justification. Her natural recovery was deliberately sabotaged. Preposterous, Thomas protested, his composure now completely shattered. My wife suffered a terrible accident. A remarkably convenient accident, Sophia added coldly. A penthouse with state-of-the-art security that mysteriously fails on the exact evening you're pressuring me to reconsider the direction of Project Lazarus. Jackson opened his portfolio and distributed documents to the board members. Here, we have records of communications between Thomas Blackwood and Elijah Blackwood in the weeks preceding the incident. You'll notice specific references to permanently removing the Lazarus obstacle, the Lazarus Project being the cornerstone of the affordable medication initiative Sophia was developing for underserved communities. This is absurd. Elijah attempted to regain control. Obviously, we were discussing technical obstacles to the project, not. Sophia smiled for the first time. Darius, if you would. The caretaker stepped forward with a tablet displaying a video. Elijah in the rehabilitation center corridor speaking with Dr. Winters. Maintain the sedation until after the board vote. Then we can allow nature to take its course. A patient in this condition for this duration, complications are inevitable. The board members watched in stunned silence. This is manipulation, Thomas shouted, his face now flushed with panic. A fabrication. Neurological rehabilitation specialist Darius Carter. Darius corrected calmly. Certified in digital forensics, and we have substantially more evidence. Jackson stepped forward, placing another document on the table. Financial records showing significant transfers from an offshore entity controlled by Elijah to Dr. Slagens and Fordhesend. Winters, beginning 2 days before Sophia's accident. Zara Washington stood up, incensed. This is reprehensible. Attempted murder, corporate fraud, family betrayal. Sophia approached Elijah, who was now retreating. What fascinates me most, Elijah, is how you and Thomas genuinely believed you could destroy me so easily, as if I, who built this company from nothing, facing skepticism at every meeting, every negotiation, every funding round, would simply surrender. Thomas, seeing everything disintegrating, played his final card. Sophia, darling, you're confused. You're still affected by the medication. We were only trying to protect you. Spare me. Sophia cut him off icily. Is your new wedding band comfortable? Or is it merely a placeholder until you can access my accounts? A week after my accident, you were already redecorating my office. Security personnel had quietly entered the room. "Miss Blackwood?" said the head of security. "The police are waiting in the reception area. Should we escort Mr. Blackwood and Mr. Blackwood there?" As the security team approached, Elijah panicked. "You don't understand. The Lazarus Project will destroy our most profitable contracts. The shareholders will abandon us. She's sacrificing decades of pharmaceutical tradition for a charity project." "It's not charity," Sophia replied calmly as Elijah was led away. "It's justice, and regarding the shareholders, they've already endorsed it. The vote occurred last night while you were plotting my demise." When the room cleared, leaving only the stunned board members, Sophia finally took the chair Elijah had occupied moments earlier. For an instant, exhaustion was visible on her face. "We thought we were losing you," Zara whispered, squeezing her shoulder. "I would have been lost," Sophia replied, looking at Darius, "if not for someone who refused to be complicit in an injustice, even when silence would have been simpler." What no one in that room could have imagined at that moment was that the conspiracy against Sophia Blackwood had revealed something far deeper than mere family betrayal. Behind the expressions of relief and congratulations, an even more disturbing truth awaited, one that connected the assassination attempt to a circle much wider and more influential than just Thomas and Elijah. The justice of that day was merely the opening move in a much larger game, where the true motivations for suppressing Project Lazarus would implicate some of the most powerful figures in the pharmaceutical industry. And as Sophia observed Darius conversing with Jackson, one question lingered in her mind. How far would the loyalty of this man, who risked everything for a complete stranger, extend? The answer she would soon discover would transform everything, not only her company, but her entire understanding of trust, power, and the true meaning of family. 8 months had passed since that explosive board meeting. The Blackwood Innovations headquarters had been transformed, not just physically, with the Lazarus Project logo now prominently displayed in the lobby, but in its fundamental purpose. Sophia watched the city from the window of her redesigned office. That morning's news reported the final verdict. Elijah Blackwood, convicted of attempted murder and corporate fraud, sentenced to 18 years. Thomas, her ex-husband, had received 12 years after a plea agreement. Dr. Winters had lost her medical license and awaited a separate trial. "You should see this," said Darius, entering the room with a tablet. The video showed patients in a community health center in Roxbury testing the new Lazarus medication delivery system. The first implementation phase is exceeding expectations. A 65% reduction in medication costs for chronic conditions. Sophia smiled. "And the shareholders? Still concerned about our ethical reorientation?" "Concerned? The stock has increased 38% since announcing the national expansion. It appears ethical business can be profitable after all." Zara Washington entered, followed by Jackson Pierce, now Blackwood Innovations Chief Ethics Officer. "The foundation is officially established," Zara announced, placing the final documents on the desk. "The Blackwood Carter Foundation for Medical Ethics." Sophia noticed Darius's surprised expression when he heard his surname linked to hers. "You saved my life," she explained simply. "Your name deserves to be there." "I still can't believe you did this," Darius shook his head, allocating 35% of the Lazarus Project's profits to reform ethical practices in healthcare facilities. Each participating hospital implements protection systems for vulnerable patients. Jackson added, encrypted monitoring in critical care rooms, independent verification of medications, external patient advocates. "By the way," Zara interrupted, "guess who contacted me today? Elijah, from prison." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "And what did our dear conspirator want?" "To negotiate. Believe it or not, he claims to have information about other executives involved in sabotaging the Lazarus Project." Apparently, his scheme had more participants than we realized, major players in the traditional pharmaceutical industry. Sophia didn't appear surprised. I always suspected the conspiracy extended further. Elijah lacked the strategic vision to orchestrate everything independently. Should I arrange a meeting? No, Sophia replied, turning back to the window. Let him remain where he is. Truth has a way of emerging naturally, in its own time. Later that day, Sophia and Darius walked through the company's new research facility. Young scientists from diverse backgrounds worked on advanced iterations of the Lazarus system. You know what impresses me most? Darius commented, observing the team. It's not the technology, it's the cultural transformation. Many of these researchers would never have had an opportunity in a traditional corporate environment. Sophia nodded. When you're completely vulnerable, as I was in that rehabilitation center, you discover who genuinely cares and who merely pretends. That experience taught me to evaluate people by their character, not their credentials or connections. You could have simply moved forward after reclaiming your company, Darius observed. Why bother changing everything? Sophia paused, regarding him seriously. Because I discovered something in that rehabilitation room. Power without purpose is meaningless. Thomas and Elijah had everything: wealth, status, influence, and yet they craved more, to the extent that they attempted to kill me to obtain it. And I, Sophia continued, I built a technology company, overcame barriers as a woman in a male-dominated industry. But for what purpose? It required nearly dying to understand that true success isn't measured by what we achieve for ourselves, but what we create for others along the journey. On their return to the office, they stopped before a new addition to the main reception area, a glass plaque engraved with a quote, "True strength isn't measured by the power we accumulate, but by how we respond when that power is threatened. It is in our moments of greatest vulnerability that we discover our authentic selves." Darius smiled as he recognized his own words spoken to Sophia during one of those nights at St. Provant. Bartholomew's. Who would have thought, he murmured, that a caretaker and an heiress presumed cognitively impaired would transform so many lives? Sophia took his hand gently. We're not finished yet. We're merely beginning. That evening, while Elijah contemplated the confines of his cell and Thomas struggled to adapt to life in federal prison, Sophia and Darius finalized plans for the largest expansion of Project Lazarus, bringing affordable medications to historically neglected communities across 5 continents. The conspiracy to destroy Sophia Blackwood had not merely failed, it had catalyzed a transformation no one could have predicted. Her near-death experience had reborn her with a greater purpose, proving that sometimes we must lose everything to discover what truly matters. As they left the office that night, Sophia paused at the door, looking back at what she had nearly lost and what she had gained instead. The company was stronger than ever, but more importantly, it now stood for something beyond profit. You know, she said to Darius as they walked to the elevator, there's something I never told you about Project Lazarus. What's that? He asked, curious. The original formula, the breakthrough that makes the medication so affordable. It wasn't developed by our research team. She pressed the button for the lobby. It was my mother's work. Darius looked at her, surprised. Your mother? I thought the Blackwood family had been in pharmaceuticals for generations. They have, Sophia nodded. But my mother wasn't born a Blackwood. She was a brilliant chemist who married into the family. Before she died, she showed me her research journals. Formulations that could have revolutionized medication costs decades ago. What happened to her research? The elevator doors opened to the empty lobby. It disappeared after her death. My father claimed it was scientifically unsound, too risky to pursue. Sophia's voice hardened. I was 16 when she died, supposedly from an accidental overdose of her heart medication. Darius stopped walking. You don't believe it was an accident. I didn't then, and I certainly don't now. Sophia's eyes reflected the determination that had built her empire. Project Lazarus isn't just named after the biblical figure who rose from the dead. It's named for my mother's work, rising again after being buried for 20 years. Does Elijah know this? No, no one in the family knows I recreated her formula. That's why they couldn't understand why I was so protective of the project details. She smiled grimly. And that's what Elijah's other participants were really afraid of. Not just affordable medications, but the questions that would arise when people realized this technology could have existed decades ago. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Darius understood that the story wasn't over. The justice they had achieved was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. One that would shake the foundations of not just the Blackwood family, but the entire pharmaceutical industry. So, he said quietly, what's our next move? Sophia looked up at the stars, her mother's daughter in more ways than anyone had ever suspected. We bring everything into the light, all of it. This story reminds us that our greatest strength lies not in the power we possess, but in the integrity with which we wield it. That behind the most profound injustices can emerge the most powerful transformations if we have the courage to convert our suffering into purpose. And sometimes, the most important revolution begins with a single act of compassion from a stranger who refuses to look away when confronted with an injustice, even when that injustice wears the respectable face of wealth and power.